So, word on the street right now is that Sony is reportedly in talks to acquire From Software owner Katakawa. Obviously, FromSoft, makers of Elden Ring and Dark Souls and Armored Core and Bloodborne and a lot of beloved titles. Man, I we'll get into all this. Quick thoughts. I hate this. I hope this doesn't happen, but let's dive in. Reuters, citing two sources familiar with the situation, report that talks between Sony and Katakawa are ongoing. And this is coming from VGC, by the way. Article will be linked in the description below. It says that should the negotiations prove successful, a deal could be made in the coming weeks. Sony declined to comment on Reuters' report, while Katakawa said it couldn't comment. Katakawa Corporation is a Japanese media conglomerate which owns a number of companies specializing in book and manga publishing, film production, DVD sales, and cross-media. Of greater interest to the video game enthusiast, however, is that Katakawa also owns a majority share in From Software, the studio behind Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and the Dark Souls games. Should the acquisition be successful, then Sony would therefore also own From Software. Katakawa also owns Dwango, a Japanese telecoms and media company which owns developer Spike Chunsoft, most recently responsible for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. If I'm not mistaken, I think they are also the makers of the Fire Pro Wrestling games. I feel like I remember that name from Fire Pro Wrestling. Regardless, earlier this year, it also acquired the Tokyo studio known in recent years for Octopath Traveler, Octopath Traveler 2, and Mario and Luigi Brothership. And then it goes on to talk about after, the rumors of the acquisition, after the Reuters report of the acquisition gained traction, the share price for Katakawa just absolutely ballooned and shot up quite a bit, over 20% overnight. So this is, like I said, I don't love this at all. I'm tired of big companies buying other big companies. I hate this weird, super, just I don't know, dystopic future where a few companies own everything. I've said that in every single video that I've talked about acquisitions in, and I feel the same way here. And I think that it's just we're in a weird spot where like this is a big deal in terms of like the gaming community. FromSoft is one of the most beloved game makers in the industry, but in terms of like larger scope deals, this isn't going to end up being a massive one in terms of the sell price. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that I would assume that this would be maybe let's see. They are valued currently around 3 billion. So, of course Sony's going to pay a premium on that. Like they're not going to just be able to buy the company at 3 billion, I wouldn't assume. So, let's say they buy them from somewhere between like 4 to 6 billion, 4 to 7 billion. Like, you know what I mean? We just saw a $70 billion acquisition go through with ABK. And there was a lot of pushback from the FTC. And maybe there will be even more pushback because this is a Japanese company buying another Japanese company. But it's, once again, I wouldn't suspect there to be a lot of government interference over a deal like this. I think the only way is if they could look at this from like a monopoly standpoint on the anime side, with Sony already owning, what is it? They own Crunchyroll right now, if I'm not mistaken. I'll Google that real quick. Yeah, see, they already own quite a few anime companies: Peppermint Anime, Crunchyroll, Funimation, Sony Pictures Anime. Yeah, I mean they own Aniplex. They own quite a few companies in the realm of animation. And so maybe there's some monopoly on that end. I don't know. I don't know much about the anime. So I was trying to look into the anime side of this story of Sony potentially acquiring Kadokawa, and the only article I could find really diving into that here is from Hindustan Times, and let's see. All right, it says Kadokawa's hold over the anime industry. Reuters reported earlier today that according to sources, the talks between the two sides are ongoing, and if successful, a deal could be signed in the coming weeks. Sony already has a 2% stake in Kadokawa and its controlled entity From Software, originally branching out as a publisher in 1945. Okay, da. Kadokawa ultimately expanded its hold over the anime industry with fantasy franchises including ReZero and Delicious in Dungeon under its hold. Earlier this year, Kadokawa acquired the anime studio Doga Kobo, responsible for anime such as Oshinoko, Season 2, Chikawa, and Alia. Sometimes hides her feelings in Russian. The conglomerate was already a major owner of the anime studios Inji. Oh boy. Uzukai-chan Wants to Hang Out, Kantaya Collection, Unnamed Memory, Upcoming Medalist, and Kinema Citrus. My Happy Marriage, The Rising of the Listen, man. The Rising of the Shield Hero, Made in Abyss, Black Bullet, and Barakaman. Listen, man. I'm not the guy to talk about anime, but I will say that sounds like a lot of anime properties that Kadokawa owns, and maybe that is a big issue here. They're just sheer amount of, like the sheer quantity of IP that Kadokawa owns on top of the different anime or different animation companies that Sony acquired in recent years. Maybe you could look at that as like, oh, there's a potential vertical monopoly to be examined here. But once again, like me speaking to this, just I'm not the guy to speak to this. I have zero insight into anything anime, so I'd actually be curious for you guys to inform me a little bit on this. Like, I don't know anything about any of these IPs, so to me, it's like, yeah, no big deal. I don't know anything. I don't know any of these anime. I've never heard of any of these anime. So are these like big, hugely successful, massively profitable anime IP? Could that be looked at as like a easy case for, hey, yeah, this is definitely has the potential for some level of a vertical monopoly in the anime space? I'd be curious to hear y'all's take on that more than for me to provide you some uninformed take on it. And yeah, we'll talk about the gaming shit. But in the game space, like, this isn't, this is peanuts compared to even looking at a Bethesda, which was what, like 7-8 billion, somewhere in that realm. Which, I mean, that's, I guess that's, more comparable. I could see Sony paying somewhere around that price range for Kadokawa. Bethesda's a much bigger overall publishing label than Fromsoft. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. At this point, I feel like a dangerous precedent had already been set where much, much bigger deals were allowed to go through. So I don't think this one will be blocked either. And I mean, if a company wants to sell, like, it's within their right to sell their company. You know what I mean? Like, that's business 101. You build up something and you make it profitable and you make it successful and you want to sell it and ride off into the sunset, then it's like, more power to you. But just from our standpoint, from you and I, well, I guess I can't speak for you, but from my standpoint, it's like, yeah, this kind of sucks. You know what I mean? Like, the idea that there's no doubt that all future single player FromSoft games are going to be exclusive to PlayStation if this deal goes through. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that that would be the case. And if it's not the case, then that's going to be an interesting thing for PlayStation to try to explain, to their other studios, kind of like the same boat Microsoft is in with trying to explain to Obsidian why Avowed is only going to be on Xbox, and why Indiana Jones is going to be coming to PlayStation, and why, like, you know what I mean? It's it's one of those things where, okay, Playground, y'all are making Fable. We're going to keep this one on Xbox, but we're going to release X, Y, and Z over to PlayStation. And Playground's like, hey, we could benefit from being over there. We could benefit from being on all platforms. Could we receive some bonuses depending on the sales that we get on these other platforms? And so there's a lot of factors like that I could see infuriating developers. And, when Insomniac's sitting there releasing Spider-Man and getting 20 million sales, and there's a user base of 30 million Xbox players who, even if you could sell it to 7 million, 8 million of them, which would be a huge attach rate, but still, if you could sell it to 3 million of them, it's like, well, that's 3 million extra sales. You're allowing Elden Ring 2 to release on Xbox, but Spider-Man 3 can't release on Xbox. Like, I could see an internal rift going on over there at PlayStation if they don't commit to keeping the Souls games and keeping the FromSoft single-player games exclusive to PlayStation. And, I think that's it's a weird issue because, you can understand totally why you acquire a Bungie and you go, okay, well, Marathon and Destiny 3, you can release that everywhere because we need as large of a player base as humanly possible to keep this multiplayer game alive. When that's not the case with single player games. You know what I mean? And I think just staying right there for a second, looking at those deals, looking at the Bungie deal and going, oh shit, that was a massive blunder. We spent, what did they end up spending on Bungie? It was a $3.6 billion deal. So once again, I feel like this would be probably a little bit more expensive than the Bungie deal. But I think it's going to be somewhere right around that same range, somewhere in between. I think this will probably, like I said, range from maybe 4 to 7 billion. Where Bungie was acquired for 3.6 billion. And once again, I'm not a financial expert, just sitting here speculating. But that Bungie deal was such a blunder that, and then also, of course, fucking Firewalk, one of the worst acquisitions in video game history, and the most expensive video game flop ever with Concord. So you got to imagine Sony sitting there looking at this, going, We got to go, if we're going to go acquire, we need some surefire bets. We need to go and acquire studios that make hits, that make games that sell, that make, that hit their damn profit margins and hit their, profit expectations. And FromSoft is a absolute hit factory. And they are so prolific. What was it, Dark Souls 3 in 2016? And then you had Sekiro 2019. And then we had Elden Ring 2022. Armored Core 2023. Shadows of the Erd Tree 2024. And they're gearing up for their next thing now. So it's like, yeah. From a business standpoint, great move. From a consumer standpoint, from a FromSoft fan standpoint, if you're a FromSoft fan and you're playing FromSoft games on Xbox, this is a bummer. This would be a total bummer if it went through. If you're playing FromSoft games on PC even, this would be a bummer. Having to log in with the PSN account and all that shit would be an absolute bummer. But from a business standpoint, Elden Ring 2 launches in 2028, and you have FromSoft building it for one platform. You launch that PlayStation 6 in 2028 with Elden Ring 2 as a launch title. Yeah, they're going to fly off the shelf. They were already going to fly off the shelf, but you've had such a weak year. Or not such a weak generation so far, I should say. And you doubled and tripled down on live service games and killed off a lot of studios doing so. And would likely, you look at the future of Haven and Sony Bend and some of these other teams, and, I don't think that there's any doubt in my mind that a few more of these games are going to flop on a catastrophic level, similar to Concord. And, we hope that no more studios are closed, but is that something we can bet on? And so as your first party lineup continues to get weaker and weaker, you need something to fill those gaps. We're at a spot where you can't even put on a showcase because your lineup is so weak. Hey, you know what helps that? A prolific developer who gets out games every massive AAA blockbusters every 3 years or so. That's a smart move. That's not a bad move at all. But once again, it's there's two sides of this that we're looking from the consumer standpoint and from a business standpoint. Great move, great business move if it goes through, without a doubt. Especially if you can get it for under like $5-6 billion. I think that's a fucking unbelievably wise move. But yeah, sucks from a consumer standpoint, definitely. And I think the interesting thing to think about is like, would this be the first developer that is allowed to go day and date, single player developer that's allowed to go day and date for PlayStation and PC? And would this be the tipping point where Fromsoft does it with, I don't know. I mean, what should we say? I mean, I think the most obvious answer would be a Bloodborne 2 or a Bloodborne remake for their first game. Maybe maybe with Sony acquiring Fromsoft, we see the expansion of Fromsoft, and they can. I'm sure they already have multiple different teams inside of Fromsoft to some degree, but maybe they expand beyond that, and they have a team working on a Bloodborne 2, and then you also have a team working on an Elden Ring 2, or whatever the case may be. But I would assume something with Bloodborne would be done. And so let's just stay there. Let's stay there for a second. This is all hypothetical bullshit, but let's stay there. Bloodborne 2. Let's say that's the next game up. And it releases day one, PS5, PC. Or a Bloodborne remake, however you want to look at it. At that point, wouldn't you have to assume, if that game was allowed to release day one, PS5 and PC, that Spider-Man 3 also would? That Wolverine also would? Wolverine will probably be out before that, but you know what I'm saying. That The Last of Us 3 also would. I think that would be the tipping point. That would be where we really... That would be the... You can't put the genie back in the bottle. After you allow Fromsoft to release a Bloodborne remake day one on PS5 and PC, like we talked about, you're going to have developers going, dude, they can do it, but we can't? Like, that's fucking crazy. But it makes no sense. And, Sony could be like, well, we have this fucking contract right here that states this, this, and that. But do you really want to piss off developers who are making your big hit games? Probably not. And if you're already allowing one single-player title to be allowed to release on PS5 and PC day and date, why not allow for the others? Like, I really don't even think it's a bad move. I think that your console user base and your PC user base are looking for two drastically different experiences. But you we can go on and on about this, but as we're seeing PCs become more streamlined in these different fashions of like, oh, hey, here's a ROG Ally, here's a Steam Deck. And as these iterations take place over the coming years, and they're easier to dock and just set up just quick with a 10-second setup to get that thing running on your TV, well, we can go and buy all of or we can just straight up play all of our Xbox games on a Steam Deck or ROG Ally through Game Pass on those devices. And now if you're releasing all of your first party games day one on PC, you know what I mean? Like, it makes it much, as these different PC handheld devices become more easily accessible for the same style of experience that we're looking for with consoles, it's going to be a harder sell to push your console, to push your PlayStation 6 and 7 or whatever the case. So it's like, it's a slippery slope. That's dangerous. It's a dangerous move to fully embrace that day and date cadence on console and PC. So that's the thing that I might be the most curious about if this does end up going through. But yeah, I'm curious to hear from you guys. If you were in charge of Sony, what would you put FromSoft on? Would you go straight to an Elden Ring 2? Because I think that obvious money suggests that, right? Souls games are successful, but they've never been juggernaut hits. 20 plus million copies sold style hits. So corporate money leans immediately towards Elden Ring 2. I think that if you want to appease the fan base, then something of Bloodborne has to be first up on the chopping block. But yeah, I'm really curious to hear you guys' thoughts on all of this. What do you think about the day and date, thing for PC and PS5? Do you think that there's anything to that? Do you think that would be a smart move? Do you think in the long term it would actually be a unintelligent move on Sony's behalf? How do you feel about this acquisition in general? Think it's bad overall for the industry? I kind of lean towards that, but I think that most, acquisitions of big ass companies gobbling up other big ass companies is just not even just bad for gaming, just bad for fucking humanity, bad for variety. That's just sort of how I feel about all this shit, but we're not going to be able to change anything on it. It's happening non-fucking stop. And if a $70 billion acquisition went through in the gaming space a couple years ago, this little $5 billion acquisition, I think, will probably go through as well. Unless, like I said, there's something to do with on the anime side of things. If there's some vertical monopoly that could be examined there, but I wouldn't expect that to be the case. Also, if I'm not mistaken, I think that Tencent was pretty regularly increasing their stake in Kadokawa, the parent company of FromSoft that Sony is rumored to be acquiring here. So I don't know. I wonder if Sony had some kind of worry of Tencent attempting to slowly increase their stake more and more, and maybe potentially gobble up Kadokawa before they could get to them. Do y'all think this is even going to go through? I think that's the bigger question. Right now it's just a rumor, just a report. But Reuters is pretty fucking reliable. So where there's smoke, there's fire in this situation, I would assume. So something I think is going on. I'm not going to sit here and predict if I do think it's going to go through or not, because if I'm being totally real, I have no fucking clue. But I would assume that this isn't just, we're going to pull a fucking rumor out of a hat. And no, I think that there's something here. Remains to be seen if anything really moves or shakes with it. But let me know what y'all think about all this in the comments down below. Not a fun topic to really dive into, but hey, it's big news. We're here. Got to discuss it.